Hello and welcome to The Exchange.
Today we're discussing work. Has work taken over our lives? And are we finding it harder and harder to switch off?
Everyone talks about work-life balance, but is it easy to achieve this?
Is there such a thing as work-life balance? Life, for many of us today, can be viewed as a mash-up of work, family and social commitments. Sometimes for one thing to go well, the others have to suffer. But does that have to be the case? Is it possible for us to be a good employee or employer and still be a good parent and friend? We only have so many hours in a day, but we try to pack as much as we can into our busy lives. And that phone keeps buzzing with calls and emails, even when you go home. So is work taking over our lives? And how's this affecting the fabric of society?
On the show, we are joined by Professor Barbara Pocock. Barbara has researched work and employment relations for more than 30 years and has worked for governments and universities. She founded and was the former director of the Centre for Work and Life at the University of South Australia. Welcome, Barbara.
Thank you.
Great to have you with us. We're also joined by Barbara Holmes, who is the Director of Managing Work-Life Balance. She has over 25 years' experience as a consultant specialising in work-life and flexible work issues. Great to have you with us, Barbara, as well. The two Barbaras, we're going to have fun today. Listen, Barbara, tell us, what would you say are the major changes we've seen in the dialogue about work-life balance over the last 30 years?
I think the question of balance has really climbed up the agenda in people's lives, and one of the reasons that has happened is that we've seen more and more women joining men in the labour market. And so what happens in a household, especially in those intense years of caring for kids and also increasingly caring for parents, there's a lot of conversation about how do we do this? How do we hold down two jobs in this household, do the right thing by our kids and be productive employees at the same time in a changing workplace?
And they're good questions, aren't they? Have you seen how that has changed, Barbara?
Yes, I have, and I think most particularly in the different values that people have. So, for example, a mature-aged worker will have very different values and needs as a younger employee, and so there really is quite a significant change about people's definition of work-life balance, because my definition of work-life balance will be quite different to yours, and I think that's one of the things that we don't yet understand. We label it work-life balance, but we don't understand or recognise that there are different things happening for different people at different times. And I think that's a really big issue.
Are people working more than ever before? Is work kind of dominating our lives more?
If you look at the Australian population as a whole, more of us are in the labour market for longer than, say, 30 years ago. And that's mostly because we've got increasing participation from women, slight decline for men, but overwhelmed by that entry of women to the labour market. And we're in there for a long time. We're living a lot longer, and a lot of those extended years are spent in the labour market, sometimes because we love our jobs and sometimes because we need the money.
Yeah, we don't have a choice.
Yeah. How driven do you think we are by lifestyle, Barbara?
And again, I think it is the fact that we actually want more. So I can remember in terms of when I was in my very first job, I was really very happy in building my career slowly and finishing at 6 or 7 in the evening, because my very first career was in the hospitality industry. But now you actually see people wanting more. So, you know, we want the mortgage, we want the home, we want the 2 cars, whatever. So we become more driven to earn, and we perhaps wanting faster acceleration in terms of our careers. So it's not, I'll wait for 5 years, it's I want it, and I want it much sooner. And I've actually got an example of a young friend of mine. He's 26. He's just moved careers for the third time because he wanted to move up that ladder so much faster, and that's very different to what it was for I guess other employees, and you might have seen that too.
I think that's part of the story, but I think some other things are happening too. It's expensive if you live in Melbourne or Sydney, and that's why we in many cases have 2 income earners. Yeah, we want more things, but in many cases the workplace wants more from us too. So the intensification of work, you know, having to do more and more actively in a certain hour of the day, to be productive is also something that our workplaces want for us, and more of us are working on the weekend or in the evening or overnight on shift work. That's really a shift in the last 30 years, and that affects the way you come home from work, your pay rate, what work takes from you or from your household.
And what's a fair amount to work, and what's a fair expectation of an employer on an employee?
Well, that is a huge question. I mean, employers always want more, and in some cases they will manage well to make sure they get the most out of the workforce in front of them, so they'll invest in them. And especially in the current workplace, I think Barbara would agree, flexibility, responding to what employees want, which changes over the life cycle. Your point's really important there. What you want when you're the mother of a young baby is very different from what you want as a 55-year-old.
And I think, Barbara, we were talking earlier when you arrived that it's not just the mother with a young baby, which is where you tend to get caught a little bit. It's the age group where you're putting your family, helping them aged care, and so it's really actually right across the spectrum we need to be looking at this.
Absolutely. And also it's not just parents with children, it's the single person who may have dependent care issues, but also the single person who has a different sort of family that is looking for a different version of work-life balance. But often, and you will see this at religious holiday times, they're the person who are asked to work so that the others can take their holiday, and I guess Christmas would be a good example. So it's that person who, well, you know, you need to work over the holiday, and for them, work-life balance and some of those issues aren't considered very often. So it's really broadening it.
And on work-life balance, I think there's been a shift in that as well. Like what might seem balanced to one person is not necessarily balanced to another person. Is it very like you can't regulate work-life balance?
Well, I think there are some things you can say, and certainly our research at the Centre for Work and Life over the last decade consistently shows, as does a lot of international research, that working long hours isn't good for you as an individual on a long-term basis, and it won't be good for your family.
So how do you define work, though? What if you're doing something that you're absolutely you are just enjoying every minute of it?
Well, that's often what is the case for people who do very long hours. They get an enormous amount out of it, but the pleasure is not shared by their children or their partner or their parents. And it's not good for society. We've got really good research to say the health budget will pay a price if a significant number, and it's mostly men, but increasingly it's women, are working very long hours. It's not good for mental or physical health. So the very devoted, energetic, fanatical worker is not necessarily what we want, even for productivity, because your productivity declines past a certain number of hours for most of us.
What would that number of hours be?
Well, it depends on what you're doing, whether you're doing hard physical labour or hard mental labour. But it's certainly, I mean, we have a 40-hour week or a 38-hour week for a reason. For most of us, 8 hours work a day is plenty, and occasional overtime. It's when you're consistently, and we now have a lot of Australian men who are consistently working hours that are well beyond that, above 50 and 55 hours a week.
And ultimately, there are going to be some consequences.
There are consequences for them in their mental and physical health. There will be consequences for their workplace over time, and there's certainly consequences for the relationships within families.
So we should go back to the 8-8-8,
No,
should we?
no,
8 hours of work, 8 hours of leisure, 8 hours of sleep?
8 hours of sleep, great idea.
Yeah, bring it on.
And there's a lot of research saying well, none of us sleep, or many of us don't sleep enough. But yes, I don't think it's a matter of everyone working 8 hours. We've got lots of people over the life cycle who are going to want to work for periods of time more, but for many of us, and especially women, 1 in 2 women, it'll be part-time hours. And the key thing that research shows is a good match between the hours you want to work and the hours you have to work will result in much better work-life outcomes than if you're working more, or especially working more than you want to.
And that's where I think flexibility comes in too, because people have got different concentration levels and different ability in terms of focusing for a very long period of time. So somebody like myself, if I'm writing a report, I can focus probably for a couple of hours, and then I need to go and walk around the block and do whatever and come back and do another couple of hours.
Yes.
In the traditional workplace, that's very difficult for people to do. But if we focus more on outputs rather than on you're here from 9 to 5, you get much better productivity and you get much better employee engagement as well.
It freshens you up, doesn't it? I do exactly the same thing. You know, you work for a couple of hours and then walk around the block or doing something just to get yourself fresh, and then
Or even do something
click back
else in the
Yeah.
workplace, a different type of
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
Yeah, and finding the times that work best for you.
Yeah.
Should we use the word busy, or is that a bit of a buzzword at the moment that might pass in time? Now, you ask people
Everybody's
and
busy.
they're all busy.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people are busy. That certainly shows up in the research that people feel like they have a lot of pressure on them, but particularly at certain moments in life when your care responsibilities are intense and your job is asking for a lot. I think the fact that we have more and more households where two people are heading out the door to do a commute, we're putting more hours in on roads, and we all know that that's not always a pleasant experience. Australians don't like commuting very much, sitting in the car, so we have to put that onto the length of the working day as well. So I think busyness is a real phenomena for a lot of people, but yes, sometimes it's talked up by
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. And I think also it's something sometimes we inflict on ourselves. Now, I just flew down today, and on the plane, as that plane landed and you were allowed to turn on your phone, almost 90% of the people on the plane turned that phone on. And it was like I couldn't allow myself the space to land because I'm busy.
And you're
to have
on
that, and
immediately.
you're on. So some of it is also about self-management and time management, and looking at different ways to do that, and managing technology rather than having it manage us. And I think that's a big issue in
It
that
is, it's
we get
huge.
driven by it. We can't turn that phone off.
Yeah, yeah. Talking of time management, we have to take a break right now, but we'll be back with more and Street Talk right after this.
Do you think as a society we have a good work-life balance culture?
From my observations at the moment, I say no. I think a lot of people are working far too hard, and it's taking a toll on their families particularly, but I think generally going right through to the whole of society.
I think generally we do, yeah.
I don't think so at all, because to have a life balance you need to have money, and to have money you need to work. So, I mean, I know myself, I struggle to find that balance.
No. I think we are more interested in money and career than family and life.
I personally think we don't. Like, I see my mum, she goes to work, works really hard, and then she comes home and she's too buggered to really do anything.
Yes, of course, especially here in Australia. We have a support. The government gave us some, like for example, you need the child care. The government gave like a half of your pay to balance your life and your work as well.
I don't think we do, to be honest. I think there's an expectation on most people to do work outside of their regular 40 hours.
Probably not, to be honest. I know, especially with like uni, kids who go to uni who don't have time to work, they don't get to balance it out, you know, they get their own time, plus people have their own jobs. I feel like there's not enough time for like family time and stuff like that.
In general, I think everyone makes a good attempt at balancing it. I find it hard, so that's why I have two phones, for example. So one's for work, and you know that goes in the cupboard on the weekends, and I only attend to my friends and family on the weekend. Otherwise, you find that due to technology, we tend to get flooded with work, information overload, and stimulus through it.
What do you think needs to change to see a little bit more of that balance?
It's hard. I don't know. Like, you see there's so many redundancies and stuff. Like, people need to, they need to work hard to make sure they keep their jobs. So I honestly don't know.
Flexible working hours.
I work casually, so the work is there when it's there.
I'd actually be happier working 4 days a week and 10 hours a day rather than 5 days a week and 8 hours a day.
I think it comes down to personal choice, really. Education, I suppose, is the key. What it means to how to manage stress and what contributes to it in terms of, being attentive to work out of hours, what that means to, to your relationships at home, to your own downtime.
I think we have to learn to enjoy every day, and that would make a big difference.
Welcome back. We're discussing whether work is taking over our lives with Professor Barbara Pocock and Managing Work-Life Balance Director Barbara Holmes. And Sandra, our Street Talk reporter, joins us. Welcome.
Hello, how are you?
Really good.
Good. It seemed quite overwhelming out there that people feel that we're not doing it well.
Yes, overwhelmingly most said no, we're not getting it right. However, the one person that didn't, I thought was interesting. I don't think she's been in Australia for a long period of time, and I don't know what country she comes from. I'm assuming somewhere like Malaysia or Philippines. But she seems to think, yes, we do here. So I guess my question would be, is it all about perspective? You know, is it different compared to other countries, particularly maybe Asia, in grabbing that balance? I don't know if there's any research on that, Barbara.
Well, great set of interviews, I've got to say. They just picked up a lot of issues. But yes, I think if you are comparing us with a number of Asian countries or developing countries, we have a much better platform of government and regulatory support for workers who are trying to hold it together. For example, we have a decent minimum wage. That is a really basic work-life provision. If you're working for, you know, $3, $7 an hour, many places in the US you'll be doing that. You don't have childcare that's safe or reliable. You know, you're going to be behind the 8 ball in terms of getting it right for your family and in your job. So Australia has a lot of really positive things about it, but we have some really difficult things which came through there too. A lot of people working more than their contracted hours. A lot of people working casually without being able to predict when their hours will be. So there's a lot of things here which we can continue to improve on, I think, and that's what came through.
And building on those rights, I mean, the right to request a flexible work arrangement, I think was a huge shift for the Australian workplace in that it got onto the agenda that flexible working is really one of the keys to people achieving their version of balance. And what I saw was this really hit managers in saying, I have to listen and I have to respond appropriately to a request for flexible working. I can't just park it in the too hard basket.
Or keep it with what you think is appropriate. If you think, no, you need to be in the office 9 to 5, you got to park that idea and listen to their idea.
Yeah. I mean, it is for certain categories of employees, but it's got it on the agenda. And what I see is a lot of corporates now say, then everybody in our organisation has the right to request. And for the employee also, it's about mutual responsibility, is putting their business case for working flexibly. So it's not just a case of you can do it, so that both of you have to manage it, so that there's a win-win. And that's, I think, where we're starting to shift.
I like the guy on the show who has 2 phones. You know, he's really trying to use the technology to put a line over the weekend and the work. I think what's difficult for many workers, especially those without a lot of power, who are threatened with redundancy, for example, they can't put away that work phone on the weekend or at night. So the technology really reaches over the boundary of the household into the relationships. So some people can manage it, and fantastic. He was struggling, but a lot of people struggle a lot with that technology and that very demanding work.
It's interesting that you said that. Over the last holidays, we actually divided our on-call duty among our entire team. And so that when we were off, we actually knew we were off. And when they were on, they knew they were on. And we had, we did 2 days each, and it really, really helped everybody's psyche, didn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But if their job is threatened with, if you're not available, well, there's plenty of other people I can find, then how do you balance that?
Well, the power base for workers is so variable, whether you're young, whether you're old, whether you're skilled, whether you're unskilled. So I feel a lot of sympathy for people who've got that weak power. If you're very highly skilled, your employer really values you and is listening to you.
And you're hard to replace.
And you're hard to replace, you're going to do a whole lot better than a lot of workers. And that's why having legislation and good quality childcare for everybody, things like that are very important basic things which Australia needs to keep working on to improve, to grow our labour market and keep us happy and well.
Just before we go to a break, one of the guys said you need money to have life-work balance. Is that accurate?
Depends what their definition of work-life balance is.
And the definition of money, how much money they need to do that.
Yeah, and this is one of the challenges is that, and I think I've said it before, is my definition is quite different to yours. Now, his definition could be very much more about things and buying time as opposed to somebody else's who would be
And expensive hobbies.
Yeah.
So, is there a call to live more simplistically? Do you think that's coming so that we're not having so much stuff to work for?
I see that in some people, but not a lot.
I think that's true for some. I mean, I've interviewed people who are very wealthy, who are very poor. Very poor in time. Their relationships have really suffered and they feel it themselves. But I have to say, I've interviewed a lot of people who are money poor, who really struggle. They're holding down 2 jobs. They're doing long commutes between them sometimes. Their kids aren't getting the time and the money that a good household needs to give kids early on and over the life cycle. It's hard when old people are in the household to be poor. So I think it can be difficult at both ends, but I do think we have to maintain a basic level that protects people who are earning a low wage, have a low income.
Yeah, well said. Sandra, thanks for Street Talk.
You're welcome.
Thank
Great
you.
segment. As always, we'll take a break and be right back after this. Welcome back. We're discussing if work is taking over our lives with Professor Barbara Pocock and Barbara Holmes as well. Barbara, I'd like to get back to what you were talking about earlier in the program in regard to managing technology. How can we really manage technology and make it work for us?
Turn it off.
Oh, it has an off button?
Turn it off.
Really?
An off button.
Get an alarm clock and get a torch. Because I was going out, well, I need my phone for the alarm. I need it for the light to go to the toilet in the night.
Yeah. I think it is about valuing the technology for what it can do for us so that it gives us flexibility in where, when and how we work, but it's actually learning where the off button is. And that's a personal management thing as well, in that I choose not to take work calls after 8 p.m. That's it. I used to have a client who would call me about 7:30 at night because he knew that I had a home-based office. And I was saying, well, why will you do this? He said, well, I've come home and I'm carrying on working. And that's great for you,
Yes,
but I
you
have a
choose
choice
not to.
and I choose not to.
So you actually asked him the question, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
Because you were helping him get work-life balance.
Absolutely. So it's about managing it. It's not about sitting at the screen for 8 hours. It's, well, how can I do this differently? How can technology work for me?
And I guess if you choose to work between 6 o'clock and midnight, you still got to consider that most people are not.
Yes. There is, in fact, Telstra, and there's a couple of people in Telstra who have a lovely footer on their emails, which is, I've chosen to send you this email at this time of the day because this is when I've chosen to work. You do not have to reply out of your normal work hours.
Oh.
Unless it's from your boss.
And that's right.
The culture is in the workplace is so important around managing technology.
Yeah.
So what is reasonable? Like, I think that an email responded to within a day or 2 or 3 maybe, or a text message responded to within a couple of days is a reasonable thing. Do people feel that way, or...? You're looking at me very strange.
I'm thinking about the texts I send my son and I want to hear from him straight away, and I never do. So I think it depends on what the issue is. Like a lot of enormous amount of our email traffic is not urgent, and it wouldn't matter if you never replied to it. Whereas other things, you know, you really do need to reply in a timely way, depending on the business of your workplace. So, you know, I think we are in an accelerating time zone in our workplaces where there is quick response expected, and there certainly are employers, managers who've got into a culture of, you know, very late at night, early in the morning emails as a symbol of how dedicated they are, and employees who feel insecure in particular will want to reply quickly, and so that's a bad thing. And some companies have now policies which say, you know, these are the hours of work, please don't email outside them.
Because you're sending a bad message.
That's what you tell me all the time. Rob says you're sending a bad message, and I'm saying, well, I don't expect them to answer it now. This suits me right now because I want the flexibility to pick the children up after school.
You see now that what the experts are saying is backing up what I've been saying to you all this time.
No. Barbara is saying that Telstra, for example, are saying this may be the hours that I'm sending it, but you
don't
need
have to.
Correct.
So that could be part of her little disclaimer at the bottom of the email.
I put that on mine now. But the other thing I see is that it's happening within teams within the workplace where they will actually talk about how they deal with those things and pressure. So what's the standard in terms of returning an email if it's an urgent one or if it's something that can wait. So they've got this team agreement that says this is how we will respond. But that also gets it on the agenda. So we're starting to talk about the fact that I'm not going to be responding between 4 and 6 because I'm picking my kids up from school, or I do my emails on the train from the Blue Mountains to Sydney in the morning, and that works for me.
Yes,
but they
certainly.
talk about it, and that's the important part, is talking about it.
I think we've also got a big problem of addiction to our technologies, and I think it is really a significant problem, especially for new generations of workers who really are, keeping up with everything, certainly, but it really is very distracting. It's not good for productivity, and in many cases it really fractures your attention. So I think we have got a real issue here that the individual in some places really struggles to control individually.
And we need to take charge of that. We have completely run out of time, ladies, but thank you for your time and thank you for your wonderful advice and input on the exchange today.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Fabulous. And thank you for watching. Please go to our website for a fact sheet as well as more information about our show. Hope you can join us next time.
See you then.